right, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle one of the most common and, frankly, frustrating challenges we face in the clinic: statin intolerance. We'll be drawing on a fantastic presentation by lipidologist Dr. Richard Rapp to build a really practical guide for handling these tough patient conversations. Let's get started.
You know this scene. It's one we've all been through. Your patient sits across from you, they're absolutely convinced their statin is causing these awful muscle pains, and they are done. They want to stop. It can feel like you've hit a brick wall. But what if there's more to the story? And what if it's actually a lot more hopeful than it seems?
So before we can even begin to solve the problem, we all need to be on the same page. We need to be speaking the same language. So first things first, let's lock down a clear, evidence-based definition of what statin intolerance really is. Thankfully, the National Lipid Association made this pretty simple for us back in 2022. Basically, statin intolerance is any side effect, usually those muscle symptoms we hear about, or SAMs, that pops up during therapy and then gets better when you either lower the dose or stop the drug. That's it. It's a clinical diagnosis, and it's all about the timing. But, and this is a big but, to actually make that diagnosis official, there are a few boxes you have to check. It's not just about one bad experience with one drug. The real definition needs the symptoms to happen with at least 2 different statins, and one of them has to be at the lowest possible dose. And of course, the symptoms have to get better when you stop. This framework is key to separating true intolerance from everything else. Okay, now this is where the whole story takes a fascinating turn. We tend to assume these symptoms are a direct result of the drug's chemistry, right? But what if they're actually caused by the idea of the drug? This brings us to a really landmark study called SAMSON. The setup for this was just brilliant. They found patients who had already given up on statins because of side effects. Then they put each person through a series of 1-month cycles, all in a random order. 1 month on atorvastatin, 1 month on a placebo, and 1 month taking no pill at all. And the whole time, patients were tracking how they felt every single day on a smartphone app.
And the results? They were absolutely stunning. I mean, look at this. Yeah, symptoms were worse on the statin compared to taking nothing, but they were almost identical to the symptoms people reported when they were taking the placebo, the sugar pill. The feeling of having side effects was basically the same, whether they were on the real drug or not.
So what does this all boil down to? This incredible number, 90%. The study came up with what they called a nocebo ratio, and it suggests that a whopping 90% of the symptoms patients felt weren't from the statin itself, but from the nocebo effect. That's when the pure expectation of harm actually causes harm.
And this is the real kicker. This is the part that shows you the power of this information. Just by being in the study and seeing their own personal data, half of these patients, people who were previously statin intolerant, were able to successfully get back on their statin and stay on it. The intervention wasn't a new drug, it was education.
Now, this is all fascinating science, but it becomes critically important when we look at what's at stake. What is the actual real-world cost patients are paying when they stop taking their statin? The data from this meta-analysis is just stark. You take patients who've had a heart attack. The ones who took their statin more than 80% of the time, they had an 81% lower risk of another heart attack, and were 53% less likely to die compared to people who didn't take it at all. Stopping the medication carries a massive, measurable, and deadly risk. Okay, so we get the nocebo effect, and we get that the stakes are incredibly high. So what do we actually do? Let's build a practical toolkit for managing these patients and keeping them protected.
First things first, you gotta play detective. A lot of common statins, like atorvastatin and simvastatin, use this one metabolic highway called CYP3A4. If your patient starts a new drug that blocks that highway, like the antibiotic clarithromycin, their statin levels can shoot through the roof, causing very real side effects. So always check that med list for these common traffic jams.
Next up, it's time to get creative with your dosing. The muscle symptoms are often dose-related, and you get the biggest bang for your buck with the starting dose of a statin anyway. So, you've got options. You can go to a lower dose. You can switch to a totally different statin that uses a different metabolic highway, like pravastatin. You can even try intermittent dosing, like 2 or 3 times a week with the long-acting ones. And sometimes, even just a short 1 or 2 week drug holiday can work wonders.
But what about that small group of patients with true, stubborn intolerance? Or the ones who just need more LDL lowering than a statin alone can give them? Well, we need a backup plan. And luckily for us, we have some really powerful non-statin options in our arsenal. Here are the main players for slashing that ASCVD risk. Ezetimibe is a fantastic first choice. Gives you about an 18–20% drop in LDL. The injectable PCSK9 inhibitors, they're the heavy hitters, cutting LDL by a massive 50 to 60%. And then you've got bempedoic acid, which is super relevant to this specific conversation.
So why is bempedoic acid so important here? It all comes down to the CLEAR Outcomes trial. And as Dr. Rapp points out, this trial was a big deal because it was specifically designed for and enrolled patients who were statin intolerant. It gave us rock-solid proof that this drug lowers cardiovascular events in the exact population we're talking about today.
All right, let's pull all these pieces together. We're going to build a clear, simple, and actionable algorithm that you can literally use in the clinic tomorrow.
Okay, here we go. The patient is sitting in front of you, they're telling you about these new muscle symptoms, and they're blaming the statin. What do you do first?
Your first move is to validate their experience. Show them you're listening. You either lower the dose or you just pause the statin altogether and see what happens. This is that de-challenge step we mentioned earlier. It's all about gathering data.
So let's say it works. They stop the pill and they feel better. You've now confirmed there's a link in time between the drug and the symptoms. So, what now? Where do you go from here?
This is where we pull out that toolkit we just built. We don't just give up. We try again, but we do it smarter. We try a re-challenge. Maybe you restart the same drug at a really low dose, or you switch to a different statin class entirely, or you try that intermittent dosing strategy. And this, right here, is the perfect moment to start the conversation about the nocebo effect.
And really, that brings us to the final, most important point. When we know that 90% of these symptoms might be driven by expectation, it completely changes our job. Our goal shifts. We're no longer just trying to find a pill they can tolerate. We're trying to empower our patients with knowledge, making them a partner in the process, so we can find a therapy that not only keeps them safe, but one they can believe in for the long haul.